Today let's talk a little bit about rear suspension. As you can see here, I got my wheel jacked up, and in order to get this wheel off, I actually need to go in the back and loosen up these nuts on the strut in order to drop the strut enough to get the wheel off. If your Subaru is 2008 or older, you will most likely have a multi-link suspension system in the rear, where the coilover bolts into the lower control arm. If your Subaru is older than 2008, you will most likely have a McPherson-style suspension system in the rear, just like the front, where the coilover bolts into the knuckle. 2008 plus WRX STI, as well as the GT86, all have near identical rear subframes, which means all their suspension components are interchangeable. This toe arm I am running from Voodoo13 USA. The coilovers I'm running from Broadway Static, and the lower control arm is from Parts Shop Max, aka PBM. The trailing link is OEM, and in my opinion does not need to be replaced. Almost forgot Racer X upper control arm. Toe arms are the only part of the suspension system that I can condone going cheap on. You can actually get a set of toe arms for pretty cheap on eBay. These ones were expensive because they're fancy and they use these rigid spherical bushings. But in the interest of saving money, the toe arm actually sees the least amount of stress of the entire suspension system. So I know a lot of guys that are running the eBay ones and not having any problems at all. Toe arms are the first suspension component I recommend getting, along with the coilovers. You need to be able to get your toe back into spec after lowering your car. Always remember that improper toe is what kills tires, not kimber. For adjusting toe in the front of the car, we use tie rods. For adjusting toe in the back of the car, we use toe arms. So which suspension components you get after that all depends on what your goals are for the wheel and suspension setup. Keeping the axle happy in a multi-link suspension system all depends on the balance of the push and pull of the control arms. The upper control arm pulls the top of the wheel inwards. The lower control arm pushes the bottom of the wheel outwards. If you intend to run less than 10 degrees of negative camber, then you can get away with doing one or the other between the upper control arm and the lower control arm. If you're going to get upper control arms from Racer X, make sure you get the version that is -9 to -14. This variant of the upper control arm allows for the largest range of adjustment. Everyone I know that has gotten the -4 to -9 degree Racer X upper control arms ends up wanting more adjustment in the end and regrets their purchase. Should have just went with the -9 to -14. The Phase 2 Motorsport upper control arm, aka P2M, is also a good choice. Just keep in mind that this upper control arm is not able to go as negative as the Racer X is. If you're only going to be replacing the lower control arm, make sure you don't want to run any camber more than -10 degrees. If you try to push the camber too far on just a lower control arm, you'll pop your axle out. This type of lower control arm from Parts Shop Max is called a drop LCA because the design of this LCA actually has a built-in drop in it, meaning the point that mounts to the knuckle is higher than the point that mounts to the coilover. So this actually lifts your wheel up higher into the car and therefore makes your car lower. You have 2 points where you can mount the coilover, one here, and this is a 25mm drop. If you mount it one hole lower, I believe it's a 45mm drop. So this kind of stuff is useful for guys that already have their rear coilovers maxed out and they're unable to go any lower. If you replace an LCA to something like this, then you can actually make the car even lower. Unfortunately, I don't recommend drop LCAs for bagged guys because when you air up, you won't be able to utilize the full length of the strut since you still have this built-in drop. If you're on bags, you'll want to look into straight design LCAs that don't have any built-in drop. My favorite straight line LCA would probably be the one from ISC. If you're static, there is literally no better option for an LCA than this one from Parts Shop Max. Not only does it have the furthest extension on the market for an LCA, it also has the built-in drop if you need to make your car any lower. The PBM LCA is also made from steel, which is way stronger than billet aluminum, even though it's not as pretty. Also, steel is cheaper than billet aluminum, even though it's stronger, so you can get these lower control arms for $360 plus shipping. Most billet aluminum lower control arms are $400 or $500 plus dollars. And they don't even have that much adjustment range. So literally, why would you get anything else? Unless you're on bags. It's also important to keep in mind that the control arm's influence on the wheel will be different depending on which one you use. -8 degrees from the upper control arm is not going to look the same on the wheel as -8 degrees from the lower control arm. Remember, the upper control arm pulls the top of the wheel inwards, the lower control arm pushes the bottom of the wheel outwards. Alright, lastly, let's say you already know that you want to go big, you already know that you want to fit some aggressive wheel specs underneath here, and that you want some big tilts. You can run the upper control arm in combination with the lower control arm like I'm doing, and so far I've been able to push this setup to -21 degrees safely. And here's what a 3.5-inch barrel looks like.